that group I spoke about, that pilot group,
Yeah.
our starting question was, what are the ways that we could unearth things potentially if we collaborate with our data, right? So that it was that open-ended line of inquiry, and we talked about attendance there, obviously. And we wanted to explore formative assessment, but actually primary to secondary transition was another area that we wanted to look at, and we sort of spoken through what we might do. And one of my former colleagues at Askell, Susanna Farrell, was a modern languages specialist, and modern languages is in a pretty tricky state nationally, isn't it, with uptake, and it's got all that accountability, all those issues that I spoke to you about earlier.
Yeah.
And we wanted to sort of try and see if at transition we could do something to support learning in modern foreign languages, because what happens at the moment is, maths and English data gets transmitted from SATs, again, normally, not for this year or last year. Come back to that though. But learning in MFL and some of the other subjects is sort of pretty much dismissed, I'm ashamed to say, by secondary schools. I mean, the experience of youngsters in MFL is variable at primary schools. In some cases it's amazing, some cases it's not particularly great. It doesn't necessarily all need to be in Spanish or French. It could be in a variety of languages as well. But the upshot is, because of all of that, pretty much none of that is then taken through to secondary school. So you can then have a mixture of, I've done all of this in year 7, potentially, if you're starting French from the word go again. And there's nothing worse, I think, with a child to, not again. Yeah. So we asked, can we find a way that's easy for year 6 teachers to describe what children have done in terms of their sort of prior attainment in MFL, and then move that through to secondary school. So Ask Eddie developed that portal, which basically matched students by UPN, and then we sort of captured the MFL. We were all ready to sort of capture the MFL sort of grid, if you like, and then match that up just by matching on UPN with the secondary school, so that there has been an unholy trade in spreadsheets at this time of year trying to transmit this. And what, spreadsheets are a recipe for disaster always, aren't they? So this is a database solution. You'll be pleased to know. So it's a database solution to match pupils from primary to secondary. So it doesn't matter where they go, it just matches on UPN. So it's a very elegant, neat solution. And then all set to go on that with a bit of charitable money to support that. Then COVID struck, and then of course all the real prospect of all data being lost about everything, not even maths and English, because at that stage we weren't even sure teachers would get back into school to be able to get to their records. So we very quickly changed gear there. We had the engine, if you like, but we I don't know if this works already, but we sort of changed the fuel, I suppose, from MFL through to maths and English. We worked with some groups of secondary and primary English and maths specialists to say, what is it you would most, from the point of view of the primary school, what is it you would most want to be able to say a secondary school colleague? Sorry, that's my dog, could be Amazon, bear with me. Telling me what I need to get next. The primary school saying, this is what I most want to say to you as the teacher in secondary school, and conversely the secondary school end saying, what do we really need to know actually? So and then trying to extract from those two positions the sort of the core of what it was important to know. So we developed that, and very, again, an amazingly fast bit of development to turn that round. And Askell again sort of made that available last year, and it's called 6 into 7. Yeah. So we were trying to sort of solve an emergency problem there, really, although actually it then begs interesting questions about transition generally. sort of relying on key stage 2 tests, and we all know that, you know, why that's dubious, basically. But actually capturing what a year 6 teacher who spent, you know, day in, day out with you know, those children, and really does know if they know their tables, or they can confidently talk about an issue, you know, after that from their writing or whatever is there. You know, I really trust those professionals and their views of those children, and it's completely different from whether they can do something in 1 hour on a maths test, right? With all of that involved, and it's free of accountability, which is crucial. This is one professional talking to another professional about that child, basically, which is the strap line. So that's now, this now takes us up to where I am now, because we're doing that again. I'm really pleased that secondary schools and primary schools in Leicestershire, my new pals, are doing that. They've agreed to do that, as they are in other local authorities as well. So that's now available to anybody. And yeah, so it's matching that maths and English again. And in our little patch of Colville, we're going to go back to that modern languages bit. We're just going back to piloting that with a group of 3 of our local primary schools, and my head of French and the head of French at the other school in our trust, to try and to get that, because I'm determined that we try and tackle MFL in our bit of the country. You know, my students really need it. You know, I want them to be citizens of the world. I want them to understand the significance of learning a language and understanding other people. And I think if the last year's taught us anything, actually, it is, you know, we've had a pandemic that's affected the entire world. We're as vulnerable here as they are everywhere else, and there are things that we need to tackle as you know, worldwide, and that puts them very much as citizens in that wider world. And you know, the fact that we're doing this, you know, we wouldn't be doing this now, would we, had it not been, you know, for the pandemic. We wouldn't have been used to Zooming and Teamsing and all of that. So the impact on that is great. Anyway, so that's sort of come now full circle, if you like, because that collaboration thing, getting schools talking to each other is a real tangible thing in Colville, and hopefully lots of other neighbourhoods around the country using that system.
I think it's amazing. Do you know what I like about it? Because you know, everything, you know, I obviously agree with the things you're saying, but keeping that child central to your ultimately what your thinking is, and how you're going to basically be able to teach that child when they move through phases is really important. And you're right. I don't think, you know, doing a CTF doesn't tell you about that child, you know, because you're not listening, you're not hearing it really from a professional, as you say. You're hearing it from stats and things that are already being made for that child.
Yeah.
And you know, if he has a bad hour or she has a bad hour, like you say, then unfortunately your view on that child is going to be completely different than potentially their own teacher who is with them from a day-to-day perspective.
Absolutely right. And the big and if I still had my policy hat on, I've still got a spare policy hat if I ever need it again. But as I say, the bigger picture here is that it's what accountability does, isn't it? So you can understand why Key Stage 2 tests, which are themselves a form of accountability for primary schools, become unreliable. You know, they can't both be output for primary and input for secondary. One test can't do that. So that's sort of flawed. That's always been flawed thinking. This is saying, you know, let's get professionals working together. You know, we've got accountability. We're always going to have it. You know, we've always got to live with it. But actually, let's get professionals talking to each other properly and using the technology to facilitate that, so that it's not burdensome. You know, we were worried about workload, obviously, you know, with all of that. And primary schools, when they've looked at that, said, you know, this is a dream. Actually, it's far better, because their experience typically is, you know, my school says, can you give us this information? Whereas the school down the road says, can you give us this information, which is frustratingly similar but annoyingly different. And so they have to sort of do different things for different secondaries. Surely secondary schools, you know, should be getting their act together to say, well, actually, we need to know this. It would be great if we knew that. about each year 6 pupil. We can all agree that it's that. I'm not saying we've got that correct at all. I am saying that we've been through several hoops with that 6 into 7 venture to say, well, you know, with colleagues who kicked it off in Greenwich, and then some more colleagues who looked at that in Yorkshire, and it's been through another iteration this year. It's you know, it may not be perfect, but it's pretty good actually, and it's certainly it is, as I say, it's based on the sort of hardcore of things that you could really need to know as a former maths teacher. You know, I need to know if a child actually really does know their tables or not.
Yeah.
I don't really need to know if they can work out areas of triangles as such, because which isn't although they do that in year 6, because you know, I can teach them that as a maths teacher if necessary, but I'll struggle to teach that to them if they can't multiply or they don't get multiplication, because that's at the core of areas of triangles really. So that's where we got to. What's the absolute sort of minimum core set of stuff to move through? And that wasn't us doing it. That was teachers saying, this is what we need to know, not politicians, not ed tech. You know, it was professionals, and that was really exciting.
Do you think it could happen at the other end, where universities get an earlier view on students?
Yeah,
and they talk to professionals in secondary school.
Why not? Well, so we've obviously spoken to other transition settings. I mean, there's lots of bits of transition that go on, isn't there? So yeah, absolutely right. I mean, you know, from early years through into reception is one possibility. You know, we've still got, so Leicestershire's still got some 11 to 14 schools. We've done away with them in Colville, I'm pleased to say, because we're now all you know, we're 11 to 18, 11 to 16. But there are some still. So there is a transition in Leicestershire at 14. Yes, you could do that. You could do that through to, say, UTC studio schools as well, which take students there, or indeed to you know, FEHE.
Yeah,
absolutely. All things are possible, aren't they? You know, this has worked well. It worked well last year with the schools that took it up. I think more schools, some local authorities are taking it up. You know, across the whole piece, which is great. I think it's a really, so the sort of the thrill for me is this is an initiative that's come from schools. It's sort of been, if you like, shepherded a bit by you know, Askell and me and other colleagues there, but it is I think a sort of a picture of what could happen. You know,
but all these things have to be driven from the need, and the need is only from you guys.
Yeah, and the yes, absolutely. But then who steers it? You know, so this is where EdTech, I think, needs something. So so any given EdTech outfit can do the best that it can in creating a sort of really great product which is usable and so on. But it's then, if we go back to our Progress 8 example, right? So CISWA are great, but other providers are available, aren't they? You know, so Speed and Sims and 4Matrix and so on, Go for Schools. They've all got that data. How great it would be, wouldn't it, if there could be that sort of more elevated approach to, well, we all know we've got our bits of product and our bits of data. Wouldn't it be great if we could put that together? Because then we actually wouldn't really need the DFE at all. Now, there's an attractive proposition. If we could do the data ourselves, we already showed that we, you know, there are instances where we could do it better than the DFE actually. So that's it. But then who leads that? You know, and that's why I think Askell, I would hope Askell would have a lead in that, because it works on behalf of school leaders, doesn't it? Yeah. And that, as you say, that's where the driving force, I think, really needs to come from. But then how do you get school leaders together? Well, you know, I was fortunate at the time, really fortunate to be working for Askell.
So in some ways with EdTech then, it's ultimately, so even though they could probably do more with data, ultimately, but the fact is, without the collaboration and maybe without I suppose the pool of data, it's never going to be 100%, you know, exactly what school leaders need until everyone starts collaborating more and sharing that data, and it becomes a proper data lake.
Yeah. Can I give you my so I don't know, there's my array of running medals, if I can, you can probably pick those out over my shoulder. So I have late on, Nick, found started running. And this is well, so I used to think the most boring thing you can imagine was running itself. Actually, I was wrong there. The most boring thing in the world is listening to somebody else talk about running, actually. So forgive me for a minute. So like many, I did the couch to 5K thing a couple of years ago, and I sort of stuck with it. And if you talk to runners, they're all into the sort of the wearable, where I'm not really regarding myself as a runner. It's a waddler really, but they've all got their bits of their wearable technology, right? So they've got their Garmin, they've got their Fitbit, they've got their Apple Watch, whatever it is. So this is exactly analogous to the sort of the system situation in schools, isn't it? So Garmin, gather data anonymously, I hope, from what we're doing and so on, and I can benchmark myself, if you like, against other Garmin users, which is fine. But the whole world isn't a Garmin user, is it? And the whole world isn't an Arbor user or a Sims user or a Bromcom user, and and they can fight each other for market share, or they can take a sort of superior position to say, well, all right, there's that going on, but on the other hand, how could we work together for a higher purpose? So in the running arena or the cycling arena, there's something called Strava, which doesn't provide the technology, but does interface with all the providers, so that all the providers can share through, is it APIs? Have I got that right? Is that the right technical term? So they provide APIs to say, let's capture data from everywhere, and then an Apple Watch wearer can have running conversations, if you like, and I can cheer them on and do the sort of social media thing through Strava. This is exactly where we were trying to get to through the open data project. You've got Sims users, Bromcom users, etc. Whilst that's going on, you're missing the trick, really. If you can take that data out and learn from it at a large scale, that's when all of those sort of exciting possibilities open up. Yeah. So I suppose if my fondest wish in the policy space and the edtech space, if you like, would be to get that to happen.
And again, you need all three. So you basically need government to say, actually, you're all going to share your data. Go back to the open data policy, and then you need ASCL or a body to basically say, right, we're now going to tell you what the sort of what we need from the data, and then tech to make it so it's easier.
Well, I agree with 2 out of 3 there, Nick. I think the government is the lame duck in that mix, actually. So from what I've been saying, schools have demonstrated that with some leadership, they can solve their own problems, right? So government data for accountability, maybe, but there's that process where schools, the census return that takes hours and so on. So all of that data gets as gets sort of cleaned. You run your routines, which you were, I don't know, were you responsible for? I can't remember, but you had a hand in probably. 5,000 error codes, which just sort of sucks the soul out of you, and you spend days trying to clean those all up, and then you get your file and you send it off, don't you, to the DFE, or collect or whatever, and then the next time you see that data actually done in that way, is in performance tables when you're being kicked. So if it was attendance, let's say, my school's going to generate 500,000 attendance marks in a year, but at the other end I'm going to see 92.3, so 500,000 data points crushed into one number. Well, at huge expense at my end, because my staff are tackling that, and it comes out 6 to 8 months later. What's the point? What good does that actually do for me, really? It's not school improvement focused, is it? It's accountability focused.
Yeah.
So we go back to my point about accountability having reached the end of where it can help the system. The next steps must come from the system, I think. We accept that there is accountability, we accept the government's got a job to do, but the accountability, I think, needs to be taken on board by the school leadership community working with EdTech. But the real point is then who draws those together. You need somebody, some organisation independent. I really hope ASCL does carry on with it. But you know, you have to have somebody sitting outside the providers themselves. I think some way of doing that.
Yeah, to take away any protectionisms and everything else, then you probably need something like the ones or the group call version. You know, you need something like that to extract it all, where that no one needs to ask the permission of the suppliers, which you don't need to do by GDPR anyway. But it's easy to make technical barriers as well, isn't it? Absolutely. So you need to release yourself from the technical barriers, but then you need the heads.
Yeah,
like you say, ASCL to again go, yeah, you can use this.
Yeah, that's right, and that you come back to those two components, don't you? Confidence in somebody's looking after your data, and then confidence in the leadership of that process.
Yeah, that
you've got. You know, you're not talking about maximizing profit or anything like that. You're talking about doing the very best you can for learners. That's the holy grail for me, Nick. That's what I hope where I hope the system will get to.
Yeah, I think we all need to collaborate more, and absolutely, it's interesting. You're right. I think and I think understandably so. Lots of ed tech will go, they're my competitors as well. You know,
right.
Why would
but you see, this is in the same way that schools have had to. You know, I could be eyeing the school, the next school along to me, thinking, what matters to me is that we do better than that school there, right? I think that's where accountability has driven school leaders to be, because of the emphasis on data, performance measures, Ofsted, and so on. It's the same dynamic, isn't it, actually? So EdTech providers driven by, the understandable need to turn over, a decent profit and all of that.
Mm.
I get all of that. I really do, and so it's the same dynamic. Is it about schools competing with each other in order to do better, or are EdTech providers competing with each other, or is it that we can actually say, well, let's take a step back and a step up, and whether you're a Garmin or an Apple or a Fitbit or whatever, can we buy into a bigger and better solution that does better by our citizens, our students?
It's always a little bit like putting your money where your mouth is. Everybody you speak to, all the CEO, including myself, everybody talks about it and said, do you know what, I love education because you feel like you're actually making a difference for children. And if that's the case, then actually put your money where your mouth is, I guess. It's ultimately where it comes down to. Yeah, wow.